Good afternoon, everyone, or I think is it still morning? Because in Western Australia, where I come from, it is well and truly afternoon, so we're somewhere in between for me. Look, I'm really very pleased to be here this afternoon, or this morning, on behalf of the Australian Institute of Management in Western Australia, and of course, our partner, AFTEC. And AFTEC and the Australian Institute of Management in Western Australia deliver programs, leadership and management development programs across India. This morning, while there are a number of challenges that have been presented so far in terms of the role of the CLO, and one of them that in fact Rakesh raised was what next, and the CLO wanting to know or focusing on what next, I'm going to talk about a very, very specific challenge. And for me, for the CLO, the critical question is this. Within an international business environment, what are the next or the new leadership capabilities that CEOs should be developing within their businesses to ensure that their organisations are well placed to remain ahead of the curve? So I was thinking that when one of our participants here this afternoon, or this morning as I said, haven't worked that out yet, and I was thinking about what next, it's actually about developing leadership and management capabilities next, in my view. Look, there's no question that the international business environment has changed and is continuing to change. Change continues to happen rapidly and in a relatively large way. And this makes the international business environment arguably more volatile than it's ever been before. And the future can no longer be predicted with any exactness. And this makes the international business environment arguably more uncertain than it's ever been before. Challenges are multifaceted and few single causes or solutions present themselves. And this makes the international business environment arguably more complex than it's ever been before. And there's little clarity on what specific events mean and the effects that they might have in the short, medium and long term. And this makes our business environment more ambiguous. And these changes, along with things like information overload, even if you take the blog example before that was used about being able to access information, we now find that we're overloaded with information. Before we didn't have enough, now we've got too much. Also the dissolution of traditional organisational boundaries, new technologies, the different values and expectations of new generations entering our workforce, and increased globalisation all make for a very, very challenging future for our leaders. And as you will all agree, all Chief Learning Officers play a critical role in the development of leaders across their organisations, leaders who can capably address those particular business challenges. So let me turn now to outlining some specific challenges with the international business environment and related new or future leadership capabilities which require the attention of the CLO. Remember that question, what next? This is my perspective on what next. So I'll present 5 business challenges in total, and along the way I'll talk to 8 future leadership capabilities which need to be nurtured by CLOs. So let me start with the very, very first challenge. A major challenge for international business is to be more innovative. And there's no doubt that on a global scale, everywhere you turn, organisations from Apple to Google to Hyundai are all looking for the next big concept. For businesses to compete and succeed on a global scale over the next decade, our leaders will need to create what some describe as an anticipatory workforce, or one that thrives on innovation. And to create such a workforce, business leaders will need to champion innovation. Now I want you to think back in your own organisation, how many programs are there that try and foster and develop innovation? I know in Australia, people talk about organisations being innovative, but there's little training or development in the area of innovation, and in particular, in the area of innovation leadership. And innovation leadership, in broad terms, refers to a process of creating direction, alignment and commitment to design and utilise something new that adds value. Leaders who are champions of innovation will build the organisation's capacity to innovate, to tap the fresh value-creating ideas of employees and those of partners, customers, suppliers and other parties who sit beyond their organisational boundaries. I'll now move on to what I consider to be a second challenge facing business leaders and the leadership capabilities required to address this challenge. Globalisation. Globalisation is rapidly defining our business, and to compete on a global scale, business leaders will need to have at least two new capabilities. And again, a lot of people in Australian organisations talk about global leaders, but again, CLOs need to ask the question, how much effort is actually put into developing global leaders? So, if we do want to respond to our global business environment, the two capabilities that I want to talk about are developing a global mindset and developing virtual leaders. Let me first of all talk about what I mean by a global mindset capability. Leaders who possess a global mindset will be proficient in doing business in a global context and conceiving strategies not only on a local basis but on an international basis. They'll need to understand international markets and world economic trends, and they'll have in-depth knowledge about cultures, the political and economic systems in other countries. Business leaders with a global mindset will have an exemplary understanding of how their global industry works, regardless of whether it sits within the private or the public sector. And let me move on to a second leadership capability required to address the challenge of globalising business, one of virtual leadership. As globalisation ramps up, businesses will have internationally dispersed teams who have different cultural backgrounds. Now, if we just stop and think about that for a minute, again, in Australia, we're connected with other countries, but we very rarely talk about how to lead virtual teams, and I wonder if that's the same here. So, as I said, as globalisation ramps up, businesses will have internationally dispersed teams who have different cultural backgrounds, and sometimes these teams will be located in different international time zones, and sometimes some of the team members will have never met each other. The internationally dispersed teams will bring to business contributions that might not otherwise have been possible due to time, travel, cost and restrictions. Increasingly, virtual teams will allow business to recruit and retain the best talent who may have been inaccessible or who are unable or unwilling to relocate. Now, up until now, many virtual leaders have viewed the task of leading virtual teams on the same basis or a very similar basis to leading on a face-to-face basis. And while many challenges associated with virtual team leadership reflect those of leading co-located teams, there are additional challenges for virtual leaders. Virtual leaders will have to devise special strategies to ensure internationally dispersed teams are aligned and committed to a business's purpose. And again, if you look at CLO at the moment, in terms of interventions to develop leadership, are we dealing with what's happening now, or are we preparing our leaders for the future? So in short, the question is, how do I, as a CLO or a CEO, bring together people working on a worldwide project, activity or operation into a cohesive partnership? And again, very little attention given to those sorts of leadership capabilities required of our future leaders. So let me focus on a third business challenge and two primary leadership capabilities required to address the challenge. Again, with the increasing globalisation of business, it's clear to many that business will face acute competition to attract and retain the best people. And with a new generation entering the workforce with different expectations about the world of work, business leaders will have to respond by attracting new recruits through facilitating what's called a more flexible work environment and through retaining talented staff by building career prospects through coaching. So if I take the first challenge first of all, which is about facilitating flexible work environments to meet the expectations of the new generations of employees entering the workforce, I'm very much of the view that future leaders will need to facilitate a much higher level of workplace flexibility to increase staff engagement and productivity and to provide greater job satisfaction. I don't think that business leaders have a choice as to whether or not to embrace workplace flexibility. I actually think that their competitiveness may depend on it. Being flexible and you'll not attract the best people to business, particularly the younger generation, or you'll lose talented people to others. It's all about work-life balance. Our future leaders will need to facilitate workplace arrangements in ways that perhaps have not been considered before and make use of more of the current options, including part-time work, even fly-in, fly-out work arrangements, working compressed hours, working non-traditional hours, and working from alternative locations. And all of that's about trying to keep the staff and stopping them to go to the competition. The second leadership capability, which describes the challenge of competition in attracting and retaining best people, is about coaching. So, to retain talented employees with leadership potential, the conventional wisdom is deceptively simple. And that is, identify, develop, and nurture them, your people, and by paying special attention to the very best people, they'll stay with the business and eventually emerge as key leaders. But translating this into action is much more difficult and requires another capability, and that is the leader as coach. So CLOs need to be spending considerable effort, in my view, in helping their leaders across the organisation become coaches. So there's no doubt that future leaders will work with CLs to continue to identify talent, engage them in programs, events and seminars as a foundation for their leadership development. However, there reaches a certain point in time where even the most talented employees will need to move out of being a passenger in their own leadership development journey and transition into a driver's seat. There needs to be a turning point where the most talented of employees are coached in such a way that they assume control of their own development and move towards becoming a high performing leader. So again, the question is, how much time and attention is given to CLOs, are CLOs giving to preparing their leaders to be coaches so that in turn you can attract and retain talent. So let me move on to the fourth challenge, and that is in relation to business productivity. Leaders of tomorrow will need to be able to improve productivity as they do at the moment. So simply put, productivity is the efficiency with an economy, within which an economy transforms inputs such as labour and capital into outputs. So how will business leaders of the future need to drive that productivity? Well, there are a number of views on how leaders should address this moving forward. And one popular view relates to how leaders possess the capability of building a high-performance environment through enhanced performance management of workforce. There's strong recognition in the business community that productivity and employee performance are inextricably linked. However, there's also a disassociation between what many leaders think and the way they behave. Many leaders simply fail to implement more rigorous individual performance management within their businesses to drive increased productivity. And that's because performance management systems are too cumbersome and lack transparency. Or it might be because performance management is more focused on process and filling out a form than about decent performance conversations across all levels of organisations. So our leaders of the future will need to adopt a more rigorous, streamlined and highly transparent approach to performance management as they attempt to drive productivity. And the question, of course, that follows from that now, are CLOs currently in the business of helping leaders to do that? Because again, when I come from, if you speak to people in an organisation, what is their biggest challenge currently and for the future? That is managing performance and performance management systems. People continue to operate performance management systems that just don't work, and they cause more angst amongst employees than joy. Of course, that can see a result which is a decline in productivity. And that relates to my second competency here, and that capability refers to how leaders foster workplace happiness to boost productivity. Many argue that if you want to boost capability, it's simply not enough to create a high-performance environment in business. Of equal importance is the concept of workplace happiness and how leaders foster a happy workplace environment to boost productivity. And in fact, it's probably the case that you can't achieve a high-performance environment without a happy workplace. So it's hardly surprising that there's an increasing interest in this particular leadership capability. And that's because many leaders increasingly believe that business outcomes are more likely to be achieved when employees are happy and they enjoy their work. So CLOs, the question is, how many of you are currently involved in developing programs to facilitate workplace happiness? Because, of course, happy workplace is a productive workplace. Yes. Let me move on to the final challenge then, and that is one about the increased need for corporate social responsibility. The basic premise is that corporate social responsibilities pays huge dividends and is alluring, and it appears to become more prominent in the minds of consumers. And I think that business leaders of the future will need to be able to capably lead and deliver CSR initiatives in the future. And again, the attention of CLOs needs to turn to what sort of programs we would need to help our leaders with corporate social responsibility initiatives. I'll finish off now by saying that in these introductory remarks, I focused on a set of 5 future challenges and a set of capabilities that go with those challenges, that respond to those challenges. They are to champion innovation, adopt a global mindset, embrace virtual leadership, facilitate workplace flexibility, coach future leaders, build high-performance environments, foster happiness in the workplace, and deliver corporate social responsibility initiatives, which I've rushed over the last one so that my other presenter can speak this morning as well. Can I just leave you with this last challenge though? The short to medium term challenge, in my view, for Chief Learning Officers is to determine whether or not existing leadership development programs, services and initiatives will produce leaders with these new capabilities to address emerging and future business challenges. My personal view is that our leadership development programs are still in the main locked into the development of traditional leadership competencies. And while these are important, if an organisation wants to stay ahead of the curve, the development of these new capabilities will be an equally important focus for Chief Learning Officers. Thank you.